2024 Agriculture and Rural Affairs Committee to order, please. And it's now 4 o'clock, and item number 1 is roll call. Go ahead, yep.
Chair Mark Jones.
Here.
Vice Chair Roger Cohey. George Froman.
Here.
Shelley Malofsky.
Here.
Adam Guile.
Here.
Amy Joanning.
Here.
And Alder Randy Udell.
Present.
Thank you very much. Approval of the minutes for the December 19th, 2023 meeting, please.
So moved.
Been a motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, a like sign. Ayes have it. It carries. Number 3, public appearances for non-agenda items. I don't think I see anyone here that everybody here is for an agenda item, I believe. So, agenda review. Deanna.
There are no changes, Chair.
Okay. Agenda items. Number 5, conditional use request by Tori Van Slyke, agent for Thomas Alt and Matt Family Farms, LLC, and EDF Renewables to grant a conditional use for a solar utility use on property located on Wayland Road. And who would like to start?
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tori Van Slyke. I'm a project developer with EDF Renewables, and it's a pleasure to be in front of you this afternoon to talk about...
Could you state your address for the record, please?
Yes, of course. My professional address is 6940 Columbia Gateway Drive, Suite 400 in Columbia, Maryland, 21046. And with me this evening, I'll just introduce the kind of cadre behind me. We have, from our project staff, we have Peter Bay with EDF Renewables and Dennis Duffin, also with EDF Renewables. We have Mike Rupiper and Joe Pallardy with EOR Consulting. And that is kind of our group there, just in case I have certain questions that come up from you all that might require some SMEs behind me, some subject matter experts. I may defer to them, but should be able to answer anything you guys have for us. So I just wanted to introduce them because they might speak.
Okay. You want to go ahead and start with your presentation?
Yes, I'd love to. Let me go ahead and share my screen. Let's see if that works.
I'm taller than you. You gave me a tall chair.
Okay, looks like everyone can see it. Yep, there we go. So I can see on the monitors up there. See if I can get this Zoom window out of my way. There we go. Okay, great. Well, thank you again. And we are here this afternoon, this evening, to present on the Sunnyside Energy Center that's currently under consideration by you all, both for architectural design review and a conditional use permit. So I thought we'd just go through some brief slides on the project and tell you a little bit about what we're doing, and then happy to answer any questions you may have. So just a little bit of background on us. EDF Renewables is one of the largest public utilities in the world, and we've been working in the U.S. for about 30 years. And I'll focus on where I just put the red box is our group. We're the distribution scale power group. So you might heard our name. We actually developed the O'Brien Solar Project that is currently operating in Fitchburg. And so like O'Brien in this project, our projects operate on the distribution grid. So they're designed to both produce that energy locally for consumption locally by the homes and businesses on the distribution grid. So just a little bit of stats on us as an entity within EDF. We have about over 1,500 megawatts to date producing through solar projects that are currently active. And we're active in about 25 states, including Wisconsin. And in Wisconsin, I mentioned O'Brien Solar, but here's our 3 other projects, 2 others, including O'Brien, or with O'Brien, that are currently operating within Wisconsin. We have the Dairyland Power Cooperative in Flambeau, and if those of you who fly in and out of Dane County Airport probably see those panels, and we did that 9 megawatt project as well. So diving right into Sunnyside, give you some quick details on it. Here's kind of the snapshot of what the land currently looks like. And we're proposing a 20 megawatt AC project, and that's going to consist of bifacial photovoltaic modules, PV modules, about 700 watts each, and central inverters. And there'll also be energy storage on this site of about 40 megawatts by 4 hours. So that's double the capacity of the solar every 4 hours for dispatchable energy storage. And for the site, we have leases or options to lease with the landowners for about 130 acres total. There's 2 landowners that cover these parcels, and we have options to lease with both. And just a quick high level of the milestones. We're anticipating our permitting will be I'm sorry?
Excuse me.
Oh, no, excuse me. Permitting will complete in the summer of 2024, targeting June. And then a notice to proceed to begin construction. We're anticipating that might push into 2025, and happy to talk through some details there of why there could be some time between those, working with the PSC. And the COD, the commercial operation date for the site, is targeted for the late end of 2026. So some of the local benefits of this project, as I mentioned earlier, this project, like O'Brien and some other ones recently permitted here, will be local energy for the local grid. We're partnering with MGE, who's both the buyer of the power of this site and will be the long-term owner of the site. And it helps support some of the various noble carbon reduction goals we see in this area. For example, MGE as a utility endeavors to be net zero carbon by 2050, and the state of Wisconsin endeavors to have 100% carbon-free electricity over the entire state by 2050. So these 20 megawatts will go be a step in that direction. This project we model, or we anticipate, will generate about $1.6 million in utility aid payments, split between the city of Fitchburg and Dane County. That's about a 60-40 split, so about 60% of that will come to Fitchburg, 40% will go to the county, and that's over the lifetime of the project. And just for some equivalencies and kind of some stats here, in year one of production, this site will produce about 48 million kilowatt hours through the solar alone, and that's about enough energy to power 6,600 Fitchburg area homes, and is equivalent to taking about 7,500 cars off the road, or about over 40,000 acres of forest and carbon sequestration. As I mentioned, this project will have a battery energy storage system component, commonly referred to as a BESS. That will be a 40 megawatt by 4 hours, I mentioned, energy storage, and that's a Tesla system. These are Tesla products, and they're lithium-ion batteries. They're the same batteries you find in your electric vehicles, your hybrid vehicles, the laptops and phones we have in front of us tonight. And they're in self-contained cabinet units that will be placed on the northeast corner of the site, as the site plan shows. And that energy storage system has a few benefits, including enhancing resiliency and reliability of the grid. This is energy that is dispatchable when other generators are down. For example, when the sun's not shining on the solar, the wind's not blowing on the wind. And dispatchable, as I said again, if there's a generator down or some loads that need to be leveled out by MGE, this is energy at the ready for them to do that. And it also helps utilities like MGE meet those obligations and renewable energy goals that I mentioned previously about renewable energy targets and portfolio standards. And importantly, the BESS is quite a safe and reliable energy solution. The PSC of Wisconsin has approved 11 projects to date with battery energy storage components, and that totals over 1,100 megawatts. And they have cited in all of their findings that there are no public safety concerns with these the BESS systems. Just as a quick slide here, just for some context, here's kind of a smattering of various national and international fire code and electric code standards that the Tesla BESS systems, the Megapack systems, meet or exceed. We can look through those really quick, but various codes around fire safety, fire mitigation, and the like. Just a quick snapshot of where we are in the development status. Just kind of the column in the middle there, the task just shows kind of the task items we've been working on and the status. I'll direct your attention to the last two rows, site diligence and approvals and permits. As you can see, before we came in front of you all for these zoning permits, we've done a fair amount of due diligence. We have a wetland delineation that was included in our submittal packet and that was concurred by Wisconsin DNR. Same with the historic and archaeological screening, as well as various environmental site assessments, title reports, things like that. And of course, after this, we get, if we're lucky enough to get CUP approval from this body, we'll then continue on to our construction ready permits to actually construct the site on that timeline I outlined earlier. So here's just a quick, I'll show this again at the end of my presentation, but this is the current site plan. This is what we submitted with our CUP and ADR permits. So I just thought kind of give you a snapshot of what the proposed site will look like, and we can refer to this if need be with questions. But I will point out if my little laser pointer is working. Looks like it's not. Let me switch to that. You can see right in this corner is where the battery energy storage is going to be. And the panels just kind of consist in this 7L kind of layout, if you will, along the parcels. And just highlighting some of our community engagement efforts that we have done to date. We did a fair amount of stakeholder outreach. That consisted of meetings, emails, phone calls, and some in-person meetings with area stakeholders. We met with the city administration back in August of last year in person and have had some phone call and email follow-up since then. We met with the two alderpersons over this district, including Mr. Udell and Mr. Wheeler. And we've met with local universities, farmers, and researchers about agrivoltaic opportunities on the parcels, which I'll mention later, and also neighbors to the project site through this same kind of outreach mechanism. Following the city's recommendation to have a neighborhood meeting, we held that earlier this month, and we mailed introduction letters to 103 recipients. 88 of those were owners of the closest properties, as you see in this image here. That white pin is kind of right the center of where the proposed project will be, and the green are the individual properties that were mailed, and the kind of red, or magenta, if you will, color just kind of sums up those numbers. So those are the 88 neighboring landowners we mailed to. And we did hold that community meeting, the neighborhood open house, and I misspoke, it was last month, I apologize. That was on January 18th from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. Just next door in the community center. And we were on hand to answer questions, and about 25 people showed up, and it was a good turnout, some good cordial discussion with the neighbors about the project, and we got some good feedback from them. So I'd like to highlight, as I mentioned, this project's been in the works for a little while, and as originally proposed, the project was considerably larger. We had it at about 60 megawatts AC, so about 3 times the size, and this is what that proposed construction looked like, and it was encompassing about 277 acres. Through some initial discussions with the city, we determined that based on some goals for future about targeting and for future development and things like that, we decided and worked with MGE to downsize the project. So now it's about a third of what it was, and that's kind of a superimposition to show you kind of what was the project kind of in the faded back and what we're at today. It's about 130 acres, 20 megawatts AC of solar. And just to kind of highlight some of where we are with the current design on the project, as I said, that original 60 megawatt project was reduced to accommodate kind of future development plans for the city. The site will use a wildlife perimeter fence, as you've seen on other solar projects approved in the city of Fitchburg, which allows movement of small wildlife, critters like squirrels, rabbits, and the like. And a low-growth pollinator mix of grasses will be planted under the panels after construction. And that will stay on throughout the life of the project and provide kind of a ground cover and help fix the soils and things like that. We also proposed some vegetative screening along Wayland Road. And this image shows that. If you look on the very bottom here, you can see that strip of about 261 evergreen trees and shrubs and about a little over 300 deciduous trees and shrubs are proposing to plant along that edge there to kind of provide some landscape buffer to the neighbors to the south. And as I mentioned, we are also exploring some agrivoltaic opportunities with local farmers. Beekeeping is one possibility. We've contacted the Dane County Beekeepers Association and a couple area sheep farmers about using sheep in conjunction with mowing on the site for some vegetation management. And we had another gentleman who actually farms directly south of the site on Wayland Road, who's also a researcher with the University of Wisconsin-Madison, who is a researcher with black currants and heritage berries. And so we're looking at a possible pilot project to co-locate some of that growth on the site as well with the solar panels. So I thought we'd touch on one item that was brought up by a few neighbors that attended the meetings, and that was on property value impacts. There's been a few kind of high-level articles over the last few years on this topic and with some varying results, but we found a few things that, you look at various studies and some kind of Fitchburg-related data I'll get into in a second, that found that impact to be negligible. As this one study we quote here says that estimated property value impacts are essentially 0% of being nearly located to a solar site. And here's some quotations, a quote from the PSC, and the PSC has looked at this in several instances, and they have found repeatedly that there is no market data indicating negative impacts to property values by being next to a solar site. As you can see there, we have a few docket cited and reference numbers for PSC documents. And another set of PSC documents and approvals, looks a little cut off by the banner there, but also concluded that there is no real evidence of widespread negative impacts to property values of being near a solar site. So to take this a little bit more granular and make it Fitchburg specific, we did a fair amount of work here on an analysis to see what has been the impact of property values being near solar. And of course, we have the O'Brien project, as I mentioned earlier, that we developed, and it's been in commission for a few years now. So we looked at it. First, over here, we took a random sample, and there were 47 properties that were within a certain distance of O'Brien. In fact, the pin's not showing, but O'Brien is right about in this area. So of those, hopefully y'all can see this graph, but the gray line here is the average home value of all Fitchburg homes from the period of 2020 to 2024. And the the blue line is the average value of those homes that I indicated here near the O'Brien site. And the orange line is the average value of homes that actually sold within a half mile of O'Brien. So we have both valuations from Zillow's estimates, Dane County property assessor data, and actual sale values showing that these homes have actually gone up in value. Nothing has gone down in value in their proximity to a solar site. So we took that a step further and we looked at this data set, which is actually homes that actually sold within O'Brien, within a half mile, within the period of 2020 to 2024. And what we found is this. The gray line, again, is the average. This is the average percent growth of median home value or home value over the period of 2020 annual or over to 2024. And as you can see, this sample, which included 53 homes, I believe, looking for my notes here. Yes, 53 homes. You can see that those homes that were in a half mile of O'Brien actually exceeded, well exceeded the Fitchburg average sale price. These are homes that actually sold, and this is marketable sale value. And sorry, I misspoke. We had 53 homes that we looked at in the sample, but only 28 of those homes actually had published market data. So there's 28 homes that you see here with the blue line that shows they are exceeding the average of Fitchburg sale prices. So we just thought that was pretty powerful research to share with this group based on some of the concerns that neighbors had about declines in property values next to solar. So the thrust here is we're just trying to just say that being near a solar site in Fitchburg has not shown that your property values are going to decline. That's kind of the thrust here, is just to try and put that argument to bed, if you will. And that concludes our presentation. Happy to answer any questions you may have, and look forward to working with you on this project. And I'll go ahead and switch to the next slide, which is just another site plan, if that's helpful to refer to during the conversation. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'll open it up now to the committee for questions for Mr. Venslake. Roger, go ahead.
First of all, I'd have to say that's a very impressive presentation, and it certainly puts to bed the retail house value question. I've never seen anything like that. Very well done.
Thank you.
One of the questions I have, or a couple of them, where are your entrances going to be to this project?
Yeah, just a second. Sorry, something happened there. I was advancing slides automatically, but let me get back to a site plan, and I can show you that. Let's see. Sorry about that. Bear with me just a second. Is it showing? Still not showing. The proposed site, as I pull this up, the proposed driveway is going to be off Wayland Road. So it's going to be just just west of the intersection with Fish Hatchery Road once we get on the parcels. And it will be cutting north into the site. Let me get that
Before the hill?
Yes, before the hill.
Okay.
How close to the house on the corner, the property on the corner, is the driveway?
I don't know that measurement offhand. And sorry, you're talking about the property on the north or the property on the south of Wayland Road?
South, on the corner of Wayland and Fish Hatchery, the Gorman property.
I don't know the exact distance, but I do know that the parcel you see here, let me switch to my little laser pointer again. You can see where we have this kind of rock feature. That's just a symbology for the laydown yard we'll have during construction. That parcel is, I believe, 150 feet wide. So there's going to be at least 150 feet. Dang it. Sorry, I don't know what's going on there. Sorry about that. Stop sharing my screen again. Let me just pull it up in PDF. It's easier to refer to here. But there's going to be at least that parcel width between that home and where the drive will be. So I could say it's going to be at least 150 feet.
That, you say that is a temporary driveway now, or will be a temporary
No,
driveway?
that's the permanent driveway. I was just referring to that kind of symbology there, which is what we call a laydown yard, which will be kind of impervious, will crushed on during construction to receive materials. And then that will be removed after construction and returned to like its natural state and seeded along with the rest of the site.
Okay. The traffic that is coming around that corner and up the hill comes pretty quick. I'm glad you're further down from the hill, but there's going to be some I'm a little concerned about the traffic.
Sure. And there we go. So I think, let's see if I can get in here. Okay, there we go. So I got up in PDF at least. We do have a second entrance proposed here off of Muchler Road. These were concerns that neighbors raised during our neighborhood meeting. So we did actually go ahead and extend this road. Hopefully y'all can see my pointer, my cursor kind of flagellating about there. But it goes all the way to Muchler Road. But we had some good discussions with the city and kind of relayed some information from Public Works engineers that thought that keeping the entrance off of Wayland Road would be preferable because that road is better designed to handle large truck traffic than Muchler Road. And same with the intersections between Wayland and Muchler. The intersection at Wayland and Fish Hatchery is a wider cut to allow for larger trucks. And I think it's just a higher class rating on that road, if I remember. So, but as you can see, we do have 2 sites proposed. And as you may have seen in the conditions that the city has proposed, because to mitigate those traffic concerns, they do have a condition that heavy truck traffic will be restricted for between 9 a.m. and 3 p.m. off that Muchler Road access, or sorry, the Wayland Road access.
Any other questions?
Do you want me to
Yeah.
speak to this?
No, go ahead, Deanna.
Yeah, just let me speak to this because I worked closely yesterday with the Assistant Director of Public Works, and so she has concerns that using the heavy truck traffic primarily on Muchler is just going to extend the amount of traffic, and the road isn't in good condition to allow that. So that's why we've placed a condition that heavy truck traffic would only be allowable off of Wayland, but between 9 and 3 p.m., so 9 a.m. and 3 p.m.
Thank you, Deanna. Any other questions?
Yes, I do. I want to begin by saying I'm fully supportive of a solar farm. I think it's a tool we have to use for the climate crisis we're in. And I think if we're expecting our utilities to convert to clean energy, we have to give them space to do that. And if landowners want to support the effort, I'm wholly supportive of that. But that said, I am concerned about something that was noted in our memo, that the landscaping maintenance that was required at the O'Brien solar farm is not being met. And I wouldn't want us to walk into another situation where we're going to approve a project with a condition for appropriate landscaping and then it not be met either. So I don't know if you can speak to that, or if it's a discussion this committee and then the Plan Commission and the council will want to speak to.
No, sure, and thank you for your comments. Yes, so we have this item has been brought up and we're looking into it. So first, we apologize and we own up that landscaping is not to snuff. It's not at the state it should be. And we just had a landscaping contractor out there just recently. We got some preliminary results from their review and shows that about half of the planted trees, or over 200 trees and shrubs that were planted there, about half are either dead or dying. So they think it's a mixture of items just didn't survive the transplant very well. It's kind of a conjecture of what may have happened, but the bottom line is they're not there. So we went up to that and we apologize for that. And so we're working with MGE, who currently owns the site, to discover, figure out the best way forward there. And we are committed to righting that wrong and making that landscape work. I will say that we're still under negotiations or kind of discussions with that company of how and when exactly to do that remediation. But at this rate, no plantings would probably go in until the spring. So we don't kind of have a similar situation. We plant today and then the next frost comes in a week and all those plants die. So we are committed to fixing that landscaping, and that should happen sometime this spring.
Are you including mowing in that agreement?
For which site?
For the O'Brien site?
There is an O&M agreement with a landscaping company to do mowing on that site, yes.
Okay, I've got more questions.
Yeah, I have a question too. There was mowing last summer done to a certain extent on O'Brien's. But my question I would have is, and I know that you've probably heard this before, is on the racking system. I live on Seminole Highway and I drive back and forth on that frequently. And many times the panels are facing the wrong way in the morning, and there's a large percentage of them that don't turn right away. And I know you've probably heard that before. And I don't know if it's the motor issue or the climate that's causing them to freeze up or what, or, and you do have maintenance listed in the packet of 1 or 2 people once a month.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I just wondered, have you addressed that issue? I mean, I'm all for the solar, by the way, too, and also with the landowners. I mean, I think it's great that the Alts and Mance are able to, invest in this, receive some of the value of it. And then I also think that as far as ag and rural, we have to approve it because we can't deny it. So I think a lot of these questions I hope are recorded for the Planning Commission, because I think they're the ones in the council that are the ones that need to follow up and see who does the maintenance and who regulates that. And as far as efficiency goes, when I've gone by there after some of the snow we had in December and saw all the panels, from laying horizontal from at the timing of when we got the snow and they were loaded up with the snow, that's in our climate, that's got to really affect efficiency, I'm sure. I know you can address that. I know it gets a reflection off of the ground too on the other side. But, you've done this for 30 years, and what in the United States, you've done it for 30 years in the United States, I know our climate's always changing, but in Wisconsin, how do we rank as far as the efficiency compared to some of these larger projects you've done in southern climates?
Sure. No, and good question. So I'll go in reverse order if you don't mind. So on the last question, I don't know that number offhand, and I'm happy to maybe check into that for you in terms of the state ranking of efficiency. As far as winter operating conditions, it's actually somewhat counterintuitive, but solar panels tend to work better in slightly cooler conditions. There's actually a max operating temperature. I can't remember what it is offhand. It's something like 45, 50 degrees Celsius, and then it's kind of a bell curve. It really drops off in efficiency. So actually in slightly cooler climates, they can be quite good for the photovoltaic effect to occur in the panel to generate electricity. And on the winter snow front, it's an interesting kind of conundrum at times, because the amount of time and cost for someone to go out there and clear panels of snow, and the machines and the people to not scratch the panels, to actually be gentle enough to push snow off them without causing damage, that could be kind of a challenge. And usually, since the panels, the solar panels are a darker color, the blacker color that the photovoltaic cell is, they tend to draw in enough energy and sunlight, of course, to make the photovoltaic effect happen. So that generally tends to melt the snow off faster than if it was just an open piece of concrete or something like that.
But the actual turning and the mechanisms, that's one issue. I'm sure you're familiar with that.
Yes, generally. And so I didn't know about O'Brien necessarily. I mean, not to pass the buck necessarily, but MGE is the long-term owner and operator of that site. They transferred ownership to them a couple years ago. So that could be a better question for them about why O'Brien specifically may not be, all the racking might not be tilting at the same time in orientation. There could be an issue with the individual motors. I'm just hypothesizing here, not to say anything about what should happen on that site, but maybe there was some water or dirt entered into the motor and jammed it up. And I know that this project, for example, will be a different racking vendor than what O'Brien is. And so the racking vendor we're using on the O'Brien site, or the planned racking vendor, we found it generally is quite reliable and is a little bit, it's actually the same racking vendor that was used on the Strix and Tidal projects that you all recently approved the last year and change. So that one is a little bit, tends to be a little bit more robust to handling some of those kind of winter conditions and reliability on the motors.
I guess I also have a question about those batteries. You're saying you're using Tesla batteries now?
Yes.
Do you have any idea on the lifespan of some of those batteries in the colder climate? Because, I've seen, I know that a lot of batteries don't work so well in cold climate, and this year is not a good example because we've had a pretty mild winter as far as cold temperatures go. But, and then what do you do with those? Those are Tesla batteries?
Correct.
Manufactured?
By Tesla.
Where are they manufactured, though?
I don't know offhand the country manufacturer. We could find that information for you, but I do know that the warranty on that system is projected to be at 20 years. So there's at least a 20-year period where they're guaranteed to produce by Tesla at the site. And if they don't meet that warranty period, then Tesla will endeavor to replace them. And yeah.
But are they recyclable battery?
Yeah, they tend to be. And lithium-ion batteries are fairly recyclable. They're individual cells of lithium-ion within each kind of battery module is composed of so many cells, and those modules are the smallest individual units, and those can be removed and replaced if necessary within the larger megapack system. And so, yes, they should be recyclable.
How long have you been using those type of batteries?
A couple years. We have a few sites that have used them, and we've found pretty good success. But I can't speak to I could look into some various project specific kind of reliability figures on those if you like. But we have found that overall on the research we've done working with Tesla, that they exceed the industry standards in terms of safety and performance, and that they've found to be quite good in the kind of the energy storage role in that sense.
And then I have one more question. As far as a lot of the metal and a lot of the modules, what % are made in Wisconsin of that?
I don't know that figure offhand. I don't know of too many racking manufacturers or module manufacturers that are based in Wisconsin offhand. But that's another fact I could look into for you, but I'm pretty sure, I don't think there are too many, if any.
Are they made in the United States?
We are seeing more and more of the materials available made in the United States. With this project, for example, if we do go to a 2025, 2026 kind of build and CO and commercial operation date, there is a high possibility that these panel manufacturers that have committed to onshoring and having new module manufacturing facilities in the U.S. will have those factories online by the time we actually start construction on this project.
Well, I would say that's good news because, we want to, keep things within our country instead of exporting in everything that, especially when we're taking off here with solar farms.
So I have a question within a comment.
Sure.
So my comment first, thank you for the presentation. I learned that by 2050, Wisconsin would like to be zero carbon or carbon free. And then I also heard you say that your project was decreased and now it is at 1/3 because we want to add homes. That seems counterintuitive to me. Here's my common sense activating again. Can you explain exactly why this project was decreased by 1/3? And my maybe third point, an area of land right off Whalen Road is the least productive farmland, but that's not included in your project?
Are you talking, sorry, so like to the west of Wayland Road? So kind of outside the image?
So where your 7 is, beneath that.
Oh, down here. Kind of the south of where the proposed panels are, is where you're
Correct.
talking.
So why
Yeah.
is that?
Well, I can answer a couple of reasons. I'll go in reverse order again. So, let me go in the original order. That might answer the questions better. So, of course, from our perspective, it'd be great to have a larger project. I mean, that sounds good. We like, the bigger project would kind of be economies of scale. There's opportunities to maximize, the work being done and have a larger project. But as I said, when we went into initial discussions with the city, we learned of just some other development interests and goals that the city has. And, the city of Fitchburg is only so big, of course. And so just kind of wanting to, be amenable to the city and show that we're willing to work with you all as partners, we decided to just downsize the project to have a smaller footprint so that more of that land could be available to other development targets the city might have in the future. For example, just north of this site, the blocks you see, the parcels you see just to the north, we were told, for example, that there is a city park plan for that area in the future. It seems kind of it's a pretty large project and it may not come to fruition, but again, just to trying to mitigate conflict with the city and keep your options open for their development, we decided to pull our project from that area and downsize it. So that said, we worked with MGE and kind of went back to the drawing board and determined what the capacity goals would be here. And we landed on that 20 megawatt AC number and a larger battery. So the battery kind of increased to offset some of the reductions in solar so that we have more capacity on site to dispatch, as I said, kind of at times when needed. So the area to the south we're referring to, since we had already met that capacity target, and where you see the trees just below where the panels are now, to directly south, that's a fairly highly sloped area. This land slopes fairly considerably to the south as you leave where the panels are. So we tend to just try to keep away from those areas because it's a lot more kind of earthwork or just kind of headache to make the panels work. And so to the south was just higher slope areas, and you're getting farther away from where the site interconnects to the grid. One reason we selected this site, one of a few, is it's quite close to what we call the POI, the point of interconnection. So as you see that where the battery block is here, just directly to the east, a couple hundred feet, is MGE's Oak Ridge substation. So that's where this project will interconnect to the grid. So that means that there's a lot less risk of voltage drop and voltage loss as the power transmit over distance, and it's a lot less infrastructure we'll have to build. There's not going to be any large, wooden power poles with meters and reclosers on them taking the power, far from the site to this point of interconnection. There'll just be a short run from that equipment pad over to the substation. So putting the panels in that farther southwest corner just means that A, it's more terrain we have to deal with, and B, since we're already meeting that capacity target, it's just like, let's just stay as close to the substation as we can.
But decreasing solar panels, but increasing battery usage. Can you speak to that a little bit? Elaborate.
Sure, and that's more of a question of what the client, in this case MGE, who's going to be both, as I said, both buying the power and the owner of the site. And sometimes in the energy world, those are two entities. You have someone who actually buys the energy produced, and then someone else might actually own the generator. In this case, it's going to be both. It's MGE, just like on O'Brien. So since they fulfill both roles, and they wanted to go forward with this project, we're trying to meet their wants and needs. And in their situation here, there was more of an interest, obviously, in the solar, but a strong interest in capacity, so that we can have the batteries. Because roughly speaking, what's going to happen with the batteries is, and I don't want to speak for MGE, so I'm not going to say exactly how this will happen, but generally speaking, those batteries are going to charge when there's excess power on the grid. So like at noon, 1 p.m., when solar is producing at its peak, but most of us aren't home using power. There's actually power tends to be fairly cheap at those midday peaks. So that power can then go into those batteries, flow through the grid, go into the batteries and charge them. And then when it's at night or it's a heavy snowstorm and say one of their other generators is down, MGE can call on those batteries to provide electricity. So that was what they wanted more on this site, was just the ability for that dispatchability of the capacity from the batteries in conjunction with the solar. If I'm making sense there.
It makes perfect sense, yeah. I would like to see I'd like to see the project just be larger and have less resilience on this battery usage. What do you do? What happens when those batteries are no good anymore? How do we recycle those?
Well, they can be recycled. Just the same as we recycle our, lithium-ion batteries that are in our laptops and our phones and our, hybrid electric vehicles. There are mechanisms to recycle those, and I think it's a very valid point. I think it's one kind of important thing to keep in mind is just the energy density and the energy value from these resources. These battery technologies keep improving quite a bit so that we can, like I said, we can pack in on that footprint you see here where the batteries are located. As I said, that's 40 megawatts by 4 hours. So that's over a 4-hour period at max discharge. That's twice the capacity of what the solar can do. So and they can recharge over a few hour period and be back up to the 40 megawatts dispatchability. So it just gives the utility that much more flexibility to have power on demand when there's a high demand. If there's a cold snap comes in, everyone kicks on their electric furnaces and heat pumps, or it's a big summer day and everyone kicks up their ACs or something like that. That power is at the ready, and you won't have. It's designed to kind of mitigate some of the brownouts, blackouts you might see on like a peak summer day, for example.
Well, my takeaway is I would like to see the project be a little larger and well maintained, but forward march.
Yeah, well, we appreciate that. Thank you.
Randy?
First of all, Tori, I would like to thank you for this presentation as well. I've seen it several times, but that leads into the number of occasions that we've met. 2 or 3 times. And I appreciate that from my position on City Council. It just keeps me in the loop because I know that when you do make that outreach, and you've done a terrific job, because I know it's been a terrific outreach program, because I've heard very little from my constituency, and that's generally not always the case. So I thank you for that. When you and I spoke, I did have some concerns about the entrance as well, but I certainly understand from a public works perspective as to why they would not come out on Muchler. I thought Muchler was a much better entrance as well, versus the location to the south. I think you are going to have some conflicts, but I understand the road issue with Muchler. But just as another question, and I think I asked this question of you last time, you don't believe there's going to be any, and I'm looking at the screen, any infrastructure rebuild beyond the substation that would be in conflict with Fish Hatchery Road? Because I'm assuming the main infrastructure goes north and south up down Fish Hatchery.
Correct. We don't anticipate any, no. I mean, our footprint as the developer of the solar site is what you see on the site plan here. So it's concentrated on those, the 3 parcels from the 2 landowners, and I guess 5 if you include those little skinny parcels here.
Sure.
But yes, I mean, we don't anticipate anything going east of those parcels onto Fish Hatchery.
Okay, very good. Thank you.
Roger has a question.
A little bit more to the next few months' concern. Would you recommend the landowner or the renter to plant a crop on that for this next year?
That's a good question. I mean, ultimately, that's up to the landowner. I think we hope to have that answer fairly soon. As I mentioned earlier, the one kind of permitting item that's kind of changed when we start construction, and it's essentially out of our control, is once we're fortunate enough to get the CUP approval from you all, MGE will then be submitting paperwork and requests to the Public Services Commission for what's called a certificate of authority, because this project is over a certain threshold in size. And the PSC has 2 approvals. This is the lesser of the 2. The bigger one is called the CPCN, this Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity. And that's for a very large site. Like, for example, if you see some of like the Koshkonong Solar Project, which I think is one of the largest to date in the state, that had to go for a CPCN. But at any rate, the CA process, the Certificate of Authority, we've learned that can take up to 12 months. And so MGE and us as well, we would prefer not to start construction until we have that permit in hand from the PSC, just in the off chance that the PSC were to not approve that. I mean, we anticipate and hope they will, of course, but that, I think, will be the main kind of gating item, if you will, to when we actually start construction on the project, is when we get that CA in hand from the PSC.
What is your estimated time for starting construction? I realize you can't give an exact date.
Sure.
But just to...
I think we would, if we have that the CA in hand relatively soon, we'd like to start construction this summer. Like, once we have, of course, all of our building ready permits from the city. So after this, we'll come back, we'll go to the next level of detail on our end and start applying for our stormwater permits, our driveway and right-of-way permits, building, electrical, all those construction ready permits. So we anticipate starting construction in maybe the middle to the end of the summer of this year, so call it July, August. If that pushes out from needing that CA from the PSC, you could add 12 months to that. So it probably wouldn't start until the summer of 25.
Okay, let me follow up on that. Put yourself in the place of the landowner, and he's making decisions right now for his fertilizer and his seed and all of his inputs for that acreage, both on the Alt farm and on the Mant farm.
Right.
Okay. So let's say that things go along and you're looking at this 12-month time frame after the approval. And for some good reason on your part, it gets approved, but yet that landowner and that farmer have gone ahead and put it on with the idea that he was going to get a crop. Now, there's several crops you can put in. You can put in a sweet corn crop or as you know, a soybean crop, all different times of yield time or growing time. Mm-hmm. But let's say that, for example, that the landowner does that, and you want to go in there and tear that up. Do you have does a landowner have any time to come back on getting paid for his input?
Yes, is the short answer. So we're actively in discussions. In fact, I just met with the Mants yesterday afternoon in person and had a good chat with them. So, we're in contact with them a lot. They've been great to work with, both families. And they know where we are, and they know kind of what some of these items we're talking about, the possibility of where we are in construction and whatnot. But yes, we have various agreement mechanisms we can lean on. We essentially call them crop damage payments. So if a farmer has their sites planted with a certain crop, and we come in and need to essentially tear down that crop to meet a construction schedule, then we have compensation mechanisms of so much per acre, depending on what the crop is and what we agree to with them to compensate for that damage.
Okay, that's good. Another question I have on the terrain and leads a little bit to soil erosion, and I know you probably worked on it because I've read your plan, your management plan. Mm-hmm. But there's a spot up there on the Mant farm by that woods up there, and I think Jerry can probably allude to that, but it's really steep.
Yeah.
Really steep. And it looks like that you're planning to put panels through that area, which is fine. Again, I'm sure you've got this figured out, but with that type of a slope, what do you do about a situation like that where you're putting in panels, and how do you avoid erosion control? Now, you're going to seed it, I understand. But
yep. Yeah, we have a couple options. Just generally speaking, like I said, when we'll do our more detailed grading plan as we apply for our stormwater permits after this, and we'll kind of go into the nitty-gritty on that specific area. But generally, there's two options, or kind of a combination of options, if you will. The first is grading, which we tend to resist, or we use as minimally as possible for various reasons, because of the erosion issue, the cost of heavy earthworks, as some of you may know that own land and know what it's like to do a lot of earthwork on your land. So there is the grading, and there's also variable post heights. So as we see, I have some photos if they're helpful in my presentation, but I'm sure you all have seen what a solar panel looks like when it's mounted on that steel post that comes out of the ground, right? We can play with the height of that panel within a certain range to accommodate the terrain, so that the torque tube that the panels rotate on is at a relatively consistent height across the terrain. So individual posts can be at different heights above ground to accommodate that terrain. Now there's limits to that too. When I'll go too high, then it becomes a wind sail and it's higher off the ground for visual effect. So all to say, those are the kind of broad tools that we use to make sure that the panels accommodate the terrain as best as possible.
I'd come back with the question is, and that piece of property up there that you're not going to go on has got a terrain like what I'm talking about, and that would have probably worked on there. You're taking some awfully good cropland out of production there on that alt farm. But I understand where you're coming from.
Sure. Thanks.
Any other questions?
Have you ever installed drainage tile?
We have not, and we tend to not, for the main reason is it doesn't play well with the piles, right? If we start driving steel piles into the ground, that's going to bust up your tile pretty quickly.
I would think if you did that before you drove those in.
Yeah, I can't think of a site offhand where we've installed tiles. It's possible we have, and I don't anticipate it on this site, for example.
I was just curious.
Okay. Adam, you got no questions? Okay. I have a bunch. I know you answered the question about the start time, so I'm comfortable with that. And you said that the O'Brien farm solar was put in a couple years ago, maybe?
Yeah, I believe it got approval from you all in early 2020, and I think it went commercial operation by about a year after that, so early 2021, mid 2021. In fact, it was later 2021. I know it was late, like Q4, so it's November, December, somewhere around there, 2021.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'm safe in saying that it's been in production at least 2 years.
Yeah.
And that it concerns me that the maintenance was just brought to your attention. So if it took 2 years for you guys to come back and look at fixing that, How should we trust you to do better on this one? Fix O'Brien's first, and then do better on this one. The old adage, trust me. Well, we'd like to trust you, but trust and make sure.
Sure. No, and that's a valid concern. And as I said, we own up to the fact that that landscaping is not up to speed. And I will say that of the landscaping that is there, as I said earlier, about half of it is on track to meet, the growth targets. But we know that's half. That's half that's not there. But there is some positivity there. It's not as good as it should be, but it's not all for naught. And we'll continue to work with MGE throughout the kind of EPC, the construction phase, and the operations and maintenance phase. As again, when we, at some point, the new owners, in this case MGE, does take over ownership of the site and kind of owns what happens on the site, but that's not, again, to put it off on them entirely, just to say that we will continue to work with them, both on O'Brien and this project, to ensure that the landscaping meets what's approved in the landscape plan.
Well, I hope that it isn't, I hope we look at it in more than every couple of years. We have to, so you'll have to come up with Deanna, some way of a yearly review or something, so that we don't have that, because we're getting a lot of this. Fitchburg's going to have about 380 acres of solar fields, and that's going to be the maintenance is going to begin to be a pretty big project. So you talked about the grading. There is some grading in this project. Will the existing waterways be disturbed? Because the Mant family went through and did a really, really nice job of erosion control and putting the waterways in. And I think you wouldn't disturb those.
You think right. No, we don't want to disturb those, because as you said, they were put in for a reason to better control the drainage and mitigate erosion off both their parcels and the parcels to the east where that drainage is coming, because this land slopes to the north. So those waterways you see are actually collecting water and channeling it kind of as they flow both to the to the east and to the north. So yeah, we're designing the site to minimize impacts to those as much as possible to keep those drainages in effect.
Will there be panels over the top of the drainage?
As currently designed, yes. There will be panels above the ground, yes.
Okay. That's a little concerning. If that washes out, how do you go back in and fix that?
The waterways, for example, or just washouts in general, or?
Well, the waterways specifically, if you didn't put panels over the top of them, it would be much easier to go in there and to repair the waterways. But if you're going to put panels over the top of them, then that makes it a lot harder.
Sure. I do know that in general, I can't remember the specifics on these waterways, but I do know with these types of green waterway installations, they're usually pretty prescriptive on the type of equipment you can and cannot use. So I'll just say that, if we have panels over the panels, I still think that, workers can get in and use hand tools, smaller equipment like, mules and mule carts, not mule animals. I guess if you want to use animals, you could, but mule carts, four-wheelers, things like that can easily get under the panels and do some of that mitigation work. But that's something that would be in the operations and maintenance agreement we would have with the civil, or the kind of the landscaping contract, the civil contractor, to just make sure to maintain those green waterways and to mitigate any repair, or to do any repairs, mitigate damage and do any repairs that might be needed that come from a washout, for example, or things like that. But ideally, again, keeping grading to a minimum here, the flow of the parcels should not be heavily altered, and those green waterways should channel water mostly as they are currently.
Okay. I've been told, and I'm not sure it's true, so I'll ask the question. Sometimes when the panels don't move, is there a reduction in the amount of electricity needed so the panels don't move? You may see some panels that don't move, and hence you have a little less electricity production.
Mm-hmm. I think the short answer is yes. I mean, there'd be specifics on each project. You can look at the outputs on a day-to-day, but yes, essentially, and that's one of the reasons these panels track, right, as they move throughout the day to follow the sun. So if there's a section of the panels that's not doing that, then their efficiency, their yield, as we call it, would theoretically go down because they're not able to capture as much sunlight and a direct impact to the module.
So it's based on use. 'Cause I know the wind, there's a wind farm not too far to the north, and a lot of times you'll see they're all running one day, and the next day half of them are or whatever, and that's based on use. I know that. They turn them down when the use is. Okay. Do the panels that you guys have, and the one that was done on Irish Lane, has the back of the panel, has grids on the back of the panel to pick up but O'Brien's does not.
Correct.
But will this new one have that?
Yes, we call those bifacial panels, and yes, this project will use bifacial. And kind of going back to your earlier question on the snow, that can also be a good thing to have in climates like this because it's going to pick up what they call an albedo effect, the reflection of sunlight from the ground, especially in snowy conditions.
Okay, you said, what did you call that again?
The bifacial.
Bifacial.
Yep.
Thank you very much.
Of course.
Something I guess I'm going to suggest it'll be, and I'll suggest it quite strongly. The signage for construction during your construction period on Wayland, especially before you come over that hill, because sometimes people pop over that hill, and as Mr. Hartman, who's sitting behind you, can probably attest because he lives there. They pop over that hill and they're going a little over the speed limit. And although there is quite a distance there, some signage would be a good way to help that. And the same thing with, at the intersection, each way at the intersection, at least on a temporary basis, depending on what our public works people suggest, that there could be some signage there, solar project in but large trucks. So I'm not the expert on that, but something to help the public would be really beneficial, I feel.
I will just say really quickly on that, we did, in the plan, we do indicate proposed signage at the entrances at least, and as we say in our response to the staff review questions, we will, of course, ensure that any signs on the site conform with ordinance, because we know Fitchburg has a pretty detailed sign ordinance, and so there's sign restrictions based on the current zone we're in, but we'll make sure that any signs that are installed comply with that.
Well, these would be temporary road signs, and I would suggest you have a huge amount of traffic that comes south on Fish Hatchery and turns west on Wayland, and they come around that corner and they're up the hill pretty quick. And so I know your load time in and out is a certain time during the day, but an extra sign here and there wouldn't be a bad idea.
Sure.
So it would be beneficial, you guys. That intersection has had fatalities. So just so you're aware of that, that's a dangerous, dangerous intersection. There was a little girl killed and two of the kids riding in the back hurt, and the driver killed also at that intersection. So we need to be very, very aware of that and be very careful.
Sure.
Okay, that lists. You said there's a 60-40 split on. Can you explain the funds? What that you talked about a 60-40 split between the county and the city?
Sure. So let's see if I remember all this correctly. So in Wisconsin, there's what's called a utility aid fund, and utilities pay, you can call it a tax, if you will, kind of a fee payment into that fund every year, or throughout the year. I think it's monthly. And then essentially the state turns around, the Department of Revenue manages it, and the state turns around and distributes those funds to local governments as kind of a compensation, if you will, of hosting generation capacity of any type, a coal plant, a natural gas plant, a dam, or a solar set like this. And the site has to meet certain minimum capacity thresholds to trigger that. So for example, the two recent ones you did, Tido and Strix, aren't big enough to qualify for this, nor was O'Brien. But this one, because of the battery, kicks it over that threshold. So that's what our kind of rough calculations were showing, that over the lifetime of the project, these are annual payments that I believe are split 60-40. So the city will get 60% and the Dane County should get 40% of the annual payments. And as that slide showed, it was $1.6 million over the 30 years of the project.
Excuse me, is that a sort of a reference to grant money that can come from state or federal?
I mean, you might be able to ask the state. It's not a grant. I think it's just essentially like, yeah, I mean, I used to work in state and local government. I'm trying to scratch my head at what the term was. I think it's essentially like I get sort of like a grant. If the state passes a program on, bikeways, for example, and then it's kind of a rain down payment to mitigate some of the installation costs of bikeways, for example. I think it's similar to that mechanism, but it's, essentially a way to kind of compensate those local governments for hosting that generation capacity on the site or within their jurisdiction.
One other question that I have, and it deals with fire safety. With the batteries and all the publicity that the batteries have had, fire safety, where that's located at, I'm a little concerned with fire access to those batteries.
Okay.
If that's where that sits, it's going to be harder. I understand why they're there, and I support that. But maybe there should be some thought given to fire access to those battery locations and to when you have to change them out also. And I'm talking maybe a driveway that's put in that's not a regularly used driveway, but someplace that the fire department could easily access if they had to.
Sure. I mean, as the site plan shows here, so there is an oval drive. Hopefully I can see it. There is essentially a drive that goes a 360 around the battery as currently designed. And that, you can see how the turns are a little kind of wider there. Those are designed to accommodate what's called WB67. So essentially a full tractor trailer with a sleeper cab and an 18-wheeler, standard 18-wheeler. So that will accommodate that. And that was actually one of the benefits of us adding that entrance off of Muchler. Now we understand and we recognize that that entrance is not supposed to be used for heavy truck traffic, but as you all recall, the nearest fire station to here is Fire Station 1, which is just up on the corner of Lacey Road and Muchler Road. So leaving that access at Muchler Road, that fire truck can be to those batteries and on site in a pretty short order.
I don't believe the fire department staffs that.
Oh, is that just an admin facility?
It no longer is staffed.
Oh, okay.
So
Well,
that is, your closest one is
Number
going
3
to be on Sain.
Okay.
So you're quite a little ways apart, or the one on number 2 would be closer.
Okay.
So that's, it's okay.
Well, I guess to just say there's one benefit of having 2 entrances like this is, again, for fire or emergency access, they can come off Muchler, they can come off Wayland. Obviously, Wayland's the primary and the preferred, but
Okay.
there is that ability to enter off Muchler if need be.
Okay, very good. Thank you. I hope that we can work out something for an annual review of the solar farms and in the agreement process, so that we don't wait 2 years to find out that the trees didn't grow. So we got to have some, either from the city level or cooperatively with all of you in MG&E and the city, as to how we're going to deal with this going forward, because we all understand that's going to be a problem. I drove by the O'Brien Farm solar site today, and it's not mowed. It looks pretty unkept all the way through. Pretty unimpressed. So I hope you can talk them into cleaning that up before you start another one.
Sure.
I think that's a good conversation point to have, that EDF is selling this project to MG&E and sort of disavowing itself from all maintenance plans. And so I guess what I would like to see as part of a conditional use permit is that EDF, I mean, some of these vegetation problems with dying trees or whatnot may not manifest until that project has already been sold. And so what I would like to see as part of a conditional use permit would be that the vegetation management component stay with EDF 1 year, 2 years beyond the date that the utility takes ownership of the project. I don't know how far we're getting into contract law and what can and can't be done, but it seems that if we're issuing EDF a conditional use permit, that it's fair to say that that vegetation management practices would be completed or insured by the entity we're issuing the permit to for a period of 2 to 3 years. I mean,
Adam just said exactly what I was thinking, is that I think when you stated that at some point, once the project is done, it's the maintenance and everything is going to be over on MG&E, and that told me that you're going to be done with it, and I think I agree 100%. There has to be some follow-up, because if MG&E doesn't do it, who does? I mean, it can't be our public works, because they're already busy enough. And
yeah, MG&E buying a project is going to be responsible for MG&E's future and current use of it. But like I said, these problems may not manifest in that first year. And I'm not saying that it's negligence on your part by any means. I'm just saying we issue the permit to you and.
Can we add that, Deanna?
Actually, it's in there.
Oh, it's in there.
Yes. So the management and all of the requirements in this conditional use transfers to MG.
Was it in the O'Brien's too, Deanna? Do you remember?
I don't know if
Okay.
it was quite as clear,
Well,
but
we've done some work.
the intention is the responsibility transfers for the maintenance of inside the fence and outside the fence. So the documents that are in your packet for this one, as soon as MG&E assumes ownership or adopts or takes on the lease, it is their responsibility to fulfill all of the conditions that are within this conditional use permit. It's there, and I think that's where part of staff's frustration has been. Because it gets transferred to an entirely different entity with unclear, at least unclear to us, the ability of them to follow through with all the elements of this conditional use permit. And just to speak more specifically, staff has brought this to MG&E's attention long before this proposal for this one. The staff has brought the issue with the O'Brien's maintenance to them before. It's not just a 2 years thing.
Well, we heard about this. We heard about it a while ago.
Well, I don't want to see us not approve it
Right.
because of the lack of maintenance. So if we get some assurances from you guys, who I hope are going to go back to Madison Gas and suggest a meeting between the city and Madison Gas and you soon to solve these issues at the O'Brien before we start this one. So I hope we can incorporate that in the approval. But there has to be someone that we can call from at 2 years, 5 years down the road. We can call. By that time, maybe you're working for Madison Gas and you're sitting at the phone. We can call whoever that person is, you, and there's a problem here. We need to solve it.
Sure.
And we need assurances from you tonight that you'll work towards that goal.
Yes, I can give you that assurance. I mean, we will work with MG and the city to the utmost of our ability to make sure that O'Brien Landscaping is is as was approved by you all in the landscaping plan and is meeting the growth targets for all the species that were proposed and approved on that landscape plan.
Okay.
Is that in your current plan with MG&E for the O'Brien? That your landscaping responsibility passed to them for O'Brien also?
As I understand it, it did. When we sell projects like this, the whole kind of, as you see in your packet, there's an LLC we create for each project, and all the assets and ownership, all the agreements are under that LLC. So when an entity like MG buys our project, they buy that LLC and all of its assets, including all the contracts executed under that LLC. And that includes any type of maintenance agreement. And then MGE, as I understand it, they have their own entities that they do landscaping and maintenance with on all their sites around the Madison, Fitchburg area, right? So I'm pretty certain what happened is, but don't quote me necessarily, is when it transferred, the landscape maintenance responsibility transferred to the entity they were using, that they contract with to do all the landscaping and maintenance at all of their sites, not just solar sites, but their buildings, their gas plants, everything within their ownership in the area.
Well, I guess what is a reasonable time frame for a meeting between you, a representative of Madison Gas, and our staff to make sure that we aren't going to have this problem continuing forward?
Sure. I think a few weeks, does that seem amenable to?
Deanna, I'm not making commitments for Deanna at all.
Yes, staff will be available in the next couple of weeks.
Okay. We'll work with Deanna and MG offline to get that meeting set up.
Okay.
Thank you.
And we'll have to have, a commitment from Madison Gas going forward that when we call that we expect something done.
Sure.
And a follow-up. So, and should that be in our approval?
You certainly can add another condition here that within the next couple of weeks, staff will meet with MG&E and EDF to discuss the maintenance and replacement of landscaping in O'Brien.
Let's give it a month.
Okay.
Give everybody a little breathing room, because nothing's going to grow for a month anyway, very much. So, but I'd like to see that sit-down meeting, and if I'm available as chair of the Ag and Rural, I would appreciate being part of that meeting.
Of course. Keep in the loop on that.
Well,
Any other questions?
would you be suggesting to bring a representative also from MG&E to the Planning Commission or with
Well, it's
EDF?
the city.
I mean,
meeting-
I know the city will do
The city
diligent
meeting and
meeting
Madison
that, but-
Gas and EDF are going to have a meeting to talk about the lack of maintenance on O'Brien, how they're going to fix it, and then how they're going to do a better job of doing the maintenance on this one. That's what I envision.
Well, I think it also would be a good thing for MG&E to use a local landscaping if they're, for maintenance.
They may. I don't know who they use.
Right.
I don't have any idea.
I believe that
I'm retired.
MG&E does use a local landscaping
All right.
contractor.
Any other questions anybody has? Comments, questions?
I call for a question.
Okay, there's a motion to call for a question. All those in favor of calling the question, say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, a like sign. Point of order, do we need to add that to the approval tonight?
Yes.
Do you need a motion?
Yeah, we'll need a motion.
You'll make a motion. What?
In the motion,
Go, you make it.
then we should make sure that that is
Yep.
taken care of. The chair can't make the motion, so.
Okay. Well, this will be a stumble.
I
All right.
have something, so just give your best shot.
Okay. I make a motion to add a condition to the proposed that a meeting is scheduled with MG&E, city staff, and EDF
EDF.
to address the maintenance issue on the current solar farm and then make sure that it is a significant part of this approval now and ongoing.
Yep, we can work with that.
Okay.
I'll second that.
And that motion is to approve, right?
Yeah, no, to-
With that,
Yeah, I make a
Okay.
motion to approve in addition to what I've just stated.
okay.
Of the conditional use. I'm going to need a motion on the conditional use, and then I'll need a motion on the ADR. We'll put your motion on the conditional
Conditional
use.
use.
So, just say
Okay.
yes.
So,
Okay,
I
so
make a motion.
Amy has made a motion on conditional use permit CU 2533-24 with the 12 conditions plus a third, plus a number 13. Thank you. Where staff will meet with MG&E, EDF in the next month to discuss a path forward to correcting the landscape and maintenance at the O'Brien Solar Farm, and then putting forth a plan to ensure that there's adequate landscape maintenance at the other solar farms that have been approved.
Thank you, Deanna and Amy. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, a like sign, and the motion passes.
And who was the second?
George.
George.
Or-
Thank you, George.
Something came from that side, so.
George. Okay, thank you. And then I also will need a recommendation, a motion on the architectural design review for Sunnyside Solar Farm.
Could we have a motion, please?
Motion to approve. I need a second. We need a second.
Second.
Motion to approve.
Okay, so motion made and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Oppose, a like sign. Ayes have it, and that also passes. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Okay. That was 5A and B.
Discussion of farmland preservation.
Yeah, then we move into, and that's as far as my agenda goes, so.
Yep, I think I left you with the...
Oh, there it is,
There.
behind there. Okay, cool, thank you.
All right, team. The next item is discussion of the farmland preservation zoning, and I just wanted to provide a little bit of context on why this agenda item is before you. The city needs to recertify our farmland preservation zoning ordinance this year by October, actually. So this is a wonderful opportunity for us to take a look at our farmland preservation zoning, also known as exclusive ag zoning district, to see if there's any updates, changes, modifications, thoughts that you all may have. We don't have to make decisions at this particular evening, but in your packet, you'll see our current farmland preservation zoning ordinance, plus the requirements that the state has in order to certify a local farmland preservation zoning ordinance. And as you may know, this is a key tool for the city in terms of our comprehensive plan and our long-range planning, but having a certified farmland preservation zoning ordinance allows our farmers to qualify for the state tax credit program.
Any thoughts or when would you see that coming before this body? Next meeting or?
No, I don't think the next meeting, but probably closer to May or June,
Okay.
depending on what kind of changes you might have for recommendation, what kinds of thoughts. So we have some time to work through.
Get it on everybody's radar screen.
Yes.
Good, thank you. Any thoughts on that? From the committee, any thoughts on that?
Preservation.
On the farm. Well, if that covers under this thing that we've talked about, I want to talk about the conditional use on the ordinance for 50% of the income coming on a farm. If this is the right time to do it, I'll be glad to start it.
Yeah, and it is. This is the opportunity, at least I put it here as the opportunity to discuss
Okay.
this ordinance.
Okay, well, here, there's a conditional use on AX, and we had an example of it at our last meeting, where an applicant comes in and uses the conditional use where they can put a residence or a house on their farm, and with stipulation, on 35 acres, but a lot of the requirements that we have for rural residential's housing, which we have in place with the RDC, do not apply. And what I'm concerned about is, in this conditional use, it says specifically an individual who earns 50% of his or her gross income of the farm, subject to Chapter 27 land use, can put this housing on that farm. Now, the part of it, and we touched on a little bit last meeting, is the 50% of income. We have no way of following up on that. We don't have the staff, we don't have a procedure to follow up on identifying whether the applicant is fulfilling this part of the conditional use. So what I would like to have us to start to consider is how we would rewrite this, or maybe even strike this whole part out of the permitted uses of AX land for development. Now, we have had a recent example of that with the Mant farm application that came in.
Gorman.
Gorman, right?
Gorman.
Well, the Gorman came in and used it.
Oh.
But here we had the Mant farm come in, and we fulfilled all of their needs. He runs the farm, he owns a good part of that farm, and he used, without a shadow of a doubt, the RRDC, and it worked. We are not obligated, under that scenario, to have to worry about a 50% income, the way it's written right here. So, with that being said, I maintain that we might and should consider striking this whole part of the conditional use. We have a tool in place to meet this need of rural residential building, in which we can take and follow up that make sure that everything is followed by what we want to have happen. And we do not have that ability with the way this is written. So that's the broad deal on it. I don't think that we've never had this. It's the first one that's ever been challenged on this. This has been on the books for years, and it was the first time that this was channeled. There were no splits involved. There's all of that we really try to do, although it's on a 35 acres, but we are trying to place residential housing where we preserve good cropland. And the way I read this, and correct me if I'm wrong, they can put that house most any place they want.
Right smack dab
Because
in the
there's no restrictions. We have no fire regulations. There are some setbacks that are talked about, but nothing like what we have and spent time and time on putting an RRDC together. So that's where I'm at right now. And I'd say that this is a discussion matter. It'll probably take a few meetings to maybe rewrite it or strike it, and before we put it into a vote. But I'd like to throw that out for discussion at this time.
Thank you, Roger. I don't think it's fair to compare those two situations because the RDC that we used on the Mant farm allowed Mr. Mant to purchase 1.5 acres from the family farm. And the idea that we had in doing that was to keep the cost for that family member not having to buy the 40 acres, of which could, for a young person, could be very restrictive. So to compare the two of those, they aren't comparable. I'll call it the 40-acre split that creates a farmette. That one that was here, the site of that home was put in the back corner, which did not disturb any of the agricultural land. And it has to go there, Roger, because the perk test has already been done, so they don't have a choice, but they have to put it there. But they have to put it there. So on this one here, it worked. It worked.
No question about
But
it.
I don't feel that it's fair to compare the 1.5 acre on the Mant piece to the 35 plus acres. They're two separate items. The thing I like about the 35 plus acres is that will never be developed.
Right.
That will stay a parcel for conceivably a long, long time. Where the 1.5 acre piece, when the family decides they want to sell that can go into development and you'll have a wall of apartments like you do on Sahin Road. That's what's concerning to me. And it's the same thing with the solar. We've got 30 to 40 years of that life of that solar is going to prevent that wall of apartments.
Yes. That's why I thought it should be bigger.
And I think as we move forward here, we got if we're going to save any ag land left in the city.
I have a comment on that. So
Amy?
when I left that last agricultural and rural affairs meeting where we approved that home to be built on that 40-acre piece, I could exhale and feel a sense of such relief knowing that 40 acres of farmland would never be developed. There would only be one house on it. And I was incredibly relieved. I smiled. I was so thrilled that we approved that. I hope that if we continue to offer this, there's not very many scenarios left in Fitchburg that are going to be able to take advantage of this with that 35-acre minimum to begin with. But I hope that we think about it long and hard and really consider what matters most to us. You know, at the end of the day, for me, I would rather see one home existing of a family who's been in Fitchburg somewhere between 5 and 7 generations than preserving 1.5 acres and leaving 100 in agriculture land only for that to be sold in 20 years and see apartments. So I have to agree to disagree, Roger, and look at this from a positive standpoint.
Correct me if I'm wrong, and I might be wrong on this, but when you have what's the definition and what are the guidelines behind a split? My understanding is a split is to be just what you say, not developed.
Right.
Well, when you go with the RRDC, there's a split that is required, and so you are taking a piece of property and saying that it will not be developed.
The 1.5 acres.
The 1.5 acres is in it, but also there's 35 acres out there someplace else that's not going to be developed.
No.
Until the FUTA comes along.
Exactly,
Right,
Roger.
but
Got a wall of
that
apartments.
holds for the
Yes.
Gorman property too. Right. I mean, if the FUTA comes along and the city changes the future land use map, there's no reason why the Gormans can't rezone.
Well,
That's
it's
what
a
I-
different ownership, so your chances are that they're not going to want to ruin the farmstead that they've created.
And that's certainly true. There's no
may be
obligation
true.
for them.
When they develop it, what you're doing is ruining the land.
So what I expect to happen with the Gorman property there, and being speculative here, and please, Deanna, correct me at any point if I'm wrong or on a wrong line here, but you've got this property that we have these conditions that they've met or agreed to meet, and you've got this ambiguity in our ability as a community to enforce that 50% income requirement that it takes to get that. But what I see happening is the house is going to get built. They'll do a 2-lot CSM of the 35 acres, put the house on one lot and then make the other part an outlot. And then when Greenfield comes along, that outlot can be part of that community development, and you will see development there. Could see development there.
And let me just be clear, staff recommended that second Gorman lot be an outlot, and they refused.
Okay.
So it is not an outlet.
Okay.
It is not an outlot.
Right, it's not an outlet
Fantastic.
now,
Okay.
and their individual intention may be different, but that is a
It
possibility
sounds like
to
their
happen.
individual intention is not different.
No, their intention is to keep it as
Yes.
farm, but somebody can. Your theory here is that the same principle. The principle is that somebody could use that to take 35 acres. The Gormans may not have or may not appear to be interested in doing that, but somebody can take 35 acres, use that rule of 50%. What do we call that? Sorry, I should reference it.
Income. 50% farm income. If you're making 50%.
But that creation, what is the whole type?
Homestead.
Homestead. So somebody can use that homestead rule to get that. Then they could do a CSM to create an outlet for the remainder, and it falls into a neighborhood plan, and then the entire neighborhood plan makes that a developable acreage.
Now, that would be a really silly move on whoever built that farmstead to put a neighborhood in their backyard, because you're not going to catch me doing that. Not
Well-
for all the money and
Well,
The theory I'm thinking along, though, is that, people don't live forever, and land ownership transfers. And when it does, what purpose does it transfer for?
Yeah, if it's sold, it goes with the deed then.
Well, but a 35-acre parcel that is in an individual ownership, as that parcel will be, or a 1.5-acre parcel where the majority of the land that 1.5-acre parcel came off of is in a different ownership. And you're correct, people don't live forever. And so then that could be a forced sale. But the 35-acre parcel that's owned with one residence on it, that's owned by the owner of that residence, chances are that's going to stay. In every scenario I know of throughout Dane County.
How many scenarios are even left in Fitchburg for
Well,
this?
there's, top of my head, I can think of 10 or 12.
That's more than I thought.
Just top of my head, there's, that.
I would have guessed like
And if we go in
2 or
the
3.
southern area, you could have more. But that locks it into open ag space.
Until the city would allow a rezone.
Okay.
And the owner would have to,
They'd have to request a rezone.
unless we use eminent domain.
Oh my gosh.
No, we don't rezone anybody, but if the owner desired.
Don't even say
and
that word, Mark.
the city was
causes
willing
me
to
nightmares.
rezone, that is possible. It isn't possible right now, because if they came forward and wanted to rezone to anything else, I would say you cannot. You have a house, you were approved for that, you have 35 acres, there's nothing you can do. But when I'm long gone and who knows when, that there could certainly come a time, and there's examples of this all on the west side of Madison, right, where the farmhouse gets absorbed into the city and all the way around develops. There's nothing inherent in what you have done here with the Gormans in terms of approving the home on the 35 acres under farmland preservation zoning. There's nothing inherent like putting a deed restriction on that property. Does that make sense?
Oh, it certainly does, but the city can rezone. And it did happen to me,
The city can change the future land use map.
and they did.
I disagree on rezoning. The city
I
can
misspoke.
change the future land use map.
Afuda came in and took my A1 exclusive land and switched it to ag transitional.
And cities under state law can do that.
Yep. And that triggered the land sale, which forced me out.
Well, let me go back to trying to make it straighten me out here. The way this reads right here, that if you have 50% of your income, you can build a house on 35 acres or someplace on that farm. Is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
You still have to have the 35 acres or more.
That's right. That's right. But I don't see any place in this. I mean, it just stops right there. We have worked hard to make sure that we are placing those homes in the most advantageous place to enhance agriculture. And I see nothing in this that would happen.
Okay.
And that conceivably to me could be putting that right out in the middle of some place that our cluster program and our rural residential program is very explicit on why we want that rural area to look like in Fitchburg.
How do we?
So, see, I don't, and so if you go to follow what we were trying to do as far as making our landscape, our rural landscape in Fitchburg to enhance agriculture, protect land, this messes it up because there's nothing behind it other than the 50% and the 35 acres.
So you're concerned,
I'm
Roger, with location of the homestead.
Yes, and exactly. And we have in place, or at least have an outline in the RRDC to answer that question.
But that is the 1.5 acre limitation that people are going to hang their hat on.
Okay, so
Because we restrict the acreage on that. It ideally is an acre. You can go up to
yes, but we require a split someplace.
that is a split, yes.
Yep.
You use a split.
Yeah,
When you
and
do
I
that.
could be on the east side of Fitchburg and buy a split on the west side of Pittsburgh to qualify.
We've not had.
If I didn't have it.
We've not done that so far, but the Mant family moved a split from land they owned. And that was
But you
Yeah.
can, you can.
Yeah.
And when we wrote that, we knew that could happen.
it's never been done
No,
yet. so
no, it can't. Yeah, that's right.
It's not been done yet. Same with the cluster has not been
But
done
that's the
yet.
way we preserve
But it-
farmland.
Well, this is
Well,
also,
Roger, you and I disagree on that. I understand your concern.
location.
What I'm
Yeah.
more concerned with is the march of the development into the agricultural land. The wall of apartments. That's what I'm the most concerned with. And if you have owners that have a 35 acre parcel, the chances of the chances of them coming in for a rezone and filling that with houses or apartments and ruining the value of their land, which is what they would do, is pretty slim.
Better off to put solar on it. That increased home values, apparently.
Anyway, that's just my 2 cents.
Right. This is a far more sophisticated conversation than I have knowledge of, and I'd have to educate myself for all of this. But if Deanna's purpose is to kind of start taking notes of what we think about the ordinance, all I want to say is that there's a huge loophole with the 50% because it says it's 50% of an individual. So you could have 2 partners. One works for Epic. The other is a stay-at-home partner who has a garden plot and sells
Tomatoes.
turnips and cucumbers, and 50% of that person's income would be it. So it seems like
And I'm
individual
totally
should
fine
at
with
least
that.
be changed to homestead or something. I think individual creates a huge loophole such that I don't have the history of the purpose of having this 50%, but I think it can be made very meaningless.
I think it is almost effectively meaningless. I mean, as
It
a
is.
new farmer, I can't grow enough corn to pay that mortgage and pay for equipment and fuel and everything. It isn't supportive. I have to have an off-site job in order to maintain a farm in 2024. Or I need a better education in farm.
So why do we have it in there?
I don't have the history of
I mean,
the
it-
discussions,
I think
how
that-
this was really
It-
originated.
I don't see
Probably
where,
more traditional, Roger. This was probably written at a more traditional time where there was one partner earning an income off-site and another was home, tending to the farmland. If I could assume or guess, it was historically old, right?
so how would you address that?
It doesn't bother me to the least.
Just leave it
Roger.
in there and
None of that bothers me. I'm so not bothered by
I
it.
think that the 50% is almost irrelevant, and if it's going to be a homestead, it's going to be a homestead, whether they have to work off-site or on-site or all entirely gardening sunflowers
If you're
to make
making
their
it
money.
off 35 acres, you're putting solar in.
Well, I think
Or some
things,
kind of
times
drought.
have changed here where generations of, that are receiving the land don't work the land. They might,
Easy, George.
maybe they lease it, but, they don't have, they work off-site. And it's just.
You have to, both.
I mean,
You have to do both.
look how many dairy farms have left Fitchburg or, been dissolved, and it's like turned into more larger factory dairy farms.
I
and-
understand Roger's point in this. I understand the location of the homestead should matter to us a little bit. I get that. I understand that because you don't necessarily want to put it in the middle of 35 acres because we are interested in preserving farmland here. So I think this is kind of multifaceted. This is a great thing because it's securing 35 acres. But at the same time, I think we should be responsible with the location of the farmstead too. So I think we're all kind of on board with that. I mean, is there some, verbiage, wording, changes, additions that we could make to this? For me, I don't leave the 50% income. I could care less about that. It's a moot point.
Well, like what you're bringing up. What you're bringing up here is the geographic location of individual homesteads that could be created on less desirable soils. And I think it's more specific to that is what we want to look at.
Putting the house on the least productive location of the 35, maybe.
Yeah, fortunately, the one that we approved, that fell into play.
It was great.
Yeah, I mean, that
It's right
fell into
there.
play.
It's
But
right where it
that's
should
not
be.
to say that if I can show that I've got 50% income with a,
You don't even have to show it.
There's no way of,
You can just say it,
whoa.
Right?
Well,
right?
there's no way of, in
Why
fact,
is it in there?
it may not even be legal.
I don't know that. I don't know that you can
I
look
don't
at
think you can do that.
financials.
Yeah, it just,
Yeah, and the reason I say that is when I did a project in the town of Oregon, and we had to take all of their tax information in to Dane County, to the zoning administrator in Dane County, And the stumbling block was, after we submitted everything and went over it, I said, what is your security for the records of my client? Those were public records.
Uh-oh.
He had all of the tax information, he had everything. And they scratched their head quite a bit and they retracted that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know the family.
Yeah, probably.
Well, I think it's something for us to think about. I think we need to discuss it. We're not going to make a decision here tonight, but
Food for thought.
it's a food for thought, and I'd like to have it on the agenda at our next meeting, and maybe we can have some discussions with individually about
I
it.
think the 50%, maybe I have to just try to think what my ancestors were thinking because they were sitting in these
Yeah.
seats.
I don't like.
Were they trying to make sure that the farmland was being farmed by someone in that homestead? That's what they're trying to do. They're trying to make sure that by saying 50% of the income is guaranteeing that somebody living in that house is farming that land.
Okay.
But
So does that apply today?
it should.
It should.
Well,
But that's where the loophole comes. It's meaninless,
It-
given the way it's
mean,
written.
I
If it's
think-
referring to an individual, I think it's meaningless.
Absolutely. And-
I agree.
And I don't, that's why I'm saying some way or other, this has to be rewritten
well, we can
and
take
strike it out.
To
We can
state-
take out the 50% of
But
income.
don't we hope that one of the, exactly. So
And
that's
then-
a moot point.
So if we do that, does state law allow us, because some of this, the 35 acres comes through state law.
Yes.
Does state law allow us on that situation to dictate to that farmstead owner where he can put his house?
I don't know.
On the 35?
On the 35-acre farmstead, not part of the RDC. You got to separate those. Those are two separate things.
Yeah, but there's a state law identifying what we want. Is the location
No, no.
ideal?
No. The, state law allows a 35-acre farmstead. Okay? And there are no restrictions on where that farmer can put that house.
Right.
Okay? That's
Right.
state law.
Okay.
So, but on the not going to the, if it's less than that, the 1.5 acres, using the RDC, we can tell them where that house is, we suggest where it should go. So we got to make sure we can't supersede the state law.
That's something I can check into.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, if that's true, you have just fulfilled everything that we're discussing. You've answered the question, if that's true.
I don't believe there is a way on the 35 acres
If it's
for a
true.
municipality to dictate to a piece of property that's over 35 acres to where they build a house.
I'll have to check on
Check that out. Yeah.
So I don't believe there is. And so, anyway, more to follow. We'll put it on the agenda for,
Sounds like it might be one of those other duties as assigned types of responsibilities.
Right.
but the 35 acre, the more we stir this, the more of them you're going to see.
Uh-oh, Roger.
So
I
because
gotta
we've
go to
only
ball
had, and how many years have we've had, this is the first one we've had in how long?
Oh, ever?
No, not ever.
Well, it's ever since,
how
I've been
long?
around 20 years and I've not had it.
How
Yeah.
long, Mark? Tell us.
1990?
Really? Was there such a thing in
1990, there was 3 of them
Was
created.
34 years ago this year.
So there was 3 of them created in 1990
It's
that
been
I'm
on
aware
books and
of.
I've seen
There may
it,
have been
and I've
more.
always questioned it, but it's never.
So
I've
it will preserve more ag land, and you won't have that wall of apartments. So anyway, Deanna, what else do you have for us?
Okay, just briefly, I just want to mention that also in your packet is the committee, commission, and board staff contact guide. I'm not going to go through that guide with you. If there's any questions or concerns about that guide, please reach out to me. This is just to offer some staff some guidance about how we work with our committees. So nothing's new in here for you all. It's not going to mean any changes for you.
Okay. I'll
Okay.
take a look at it.
I'll just do a brief department report. Our neighborhood plans are moving ahead. We've had the steering committee number 2 for both South Stoner Prairie and Greenfield. We are scheduling the steering committee number 3 for Greenfield and South Stoner. I do want to point out that the South Stoner neighborhood plan, that survey is out. I encourage you to share that survey. If you need the link, just let me know. But anyone, you don't have to be in South Stoner Neighborhood Prairie in order to take that survey. But there's a really cool survey that's just up on the planning website. And I think I can leave it there this evening.
Okay, when are the next meetings on those two?
They're not firm and scheduled. Right now, we're thinking Greenfield March 7th and South Stoner Prairie March 28th. But
Okay. Yeah,
nothing's set in stone.
nothing set in stone. Can you report to the committee what the tone of the neighborhoods have been for each of those developments?
Sure. We've had one open house for both of the neighborhood plans, and then we've had one special meeting, public meeting, visioning meeting for Greenfield. So I'll start off with Greenfield. In general, there's very deep concerns about urban development in Greenfield. I would say that in general, people prefer to maintain open space, agriculture, and the single-family homes that they have. Is that accurate?
I would say yes. How about the South Stoner?
South Stoner Prairie hasn't had as robust in terms of the neighborhood. In general, most of the comments have come from Quarry Vista, and they're very interested in ensuring that we have linked open space, connectivity in terms of pathways and trails and bike opportunities, and how that ties into Quarry Ridge and the Quarry Ridge natural area. There is interest to figure out how some of the landowners in South Stoner Prairie really want to ensure that their lands are not quarried and prefer single family.
Okay, yeah, I've not attended any of those, so I don't know that. Any questions to Deanna about either of those?
So what is kind of the plan moving forward with the Greenfield? Because in summary, I haven't been able to attend any of the meetings. So if like the general sense and feedback is that they just want it kind of left how it is, what?
I think that is kind of this initial sense. The next step is staff is working with the consultants to kind of develop some bubble diagrams that we call them that kind of can look at where different things could fit in the future. I want to stress that these are long-range plans, right? It doesn't mean that there's going to be a single-family new subdivision plop down anywheres in the next 3 years, right? So we're going to keep on working with the neighbors. And then when we bring forward this initial kind of bubble diagram piece, I'll bring those to you all.
Okay, great. Thank
Okay.
you.
That would be appreciated. That would, I know that several of the landowners have been met with. There's only a handful of large landowners, how many have you met with? Several of them on?
Yes, we have met with several of the landowners in Greenfield, and then also, I think we've mostly covered South Stoner Prairie. We have not been able to meet with Haas. We've reached out a number of times to meet with Haas, but that has not been possible at this particular point. We met with Francesca Kane. Very informative. We, of course, met with you. And we haven't formally met with the Frostwood Farms people yet. And of course, the Stolmans are on the steering committee, too.
Okay, anything else? Has anybody got anything else?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Been a motion made to adjourn. A second, please.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
We're adjourned.